Chapter 3, Section 1. Solving one-step equations.
Thank you.
Okay. Who can tell me what the difference between an equation and a expression is? For numbers.
One has an equal sign.
Right, which one has an equal sign?
Equation.
Equation has an equal sign. So basically we have an equation, okay, that we need to solve for. An expression that has an equal sign. That's what equation is. We just said that. Okay, an expression with an equal sign. Now, when you talk about equations, you need to think of the equal sign like a scale. I think I have one of those. An equation. I do not have a scale. Okay. But think of the scale, the equal sign like a scale. Okay? What's a scale? What do you think of when you think of a scale?
A balance.
Yeah, balance. I think of these two like little plate things that hang, and if they're equal, right, it's going to be right in the middle. You guys know what I'm talking about? A balance scale. The goal is to keep the scale balanced. And in order to do that, if you add 2 pounds to one side, what do you have to do to the other side?
Add 2 pounds.
In a scale, add 2 pounds. Yes. Same thing as an equation. Whatever you do to one side of an equation, you must do the same thing to the other side in order to keep a balance. If you just do it to one side, your balance is going to be thrown off and you're going to be in deep trouble. Okay? You ready to move? No? Okay. That's okay. Now, we need to remind ourselves to talk about opposites. Okay? The opposite of addition is subtraction. The opposite of subtraction is addition. The opposite of multiplication is division. The opposite of division is multiplication. All right, let's do some examples. Okay, we're going to start with the first opposite. Suppose I have an equation with a variable in it. X plus 4 equals 2. Okay, right now, I want to think of a value for X so that the balance is equal. What would X have to equal in order for the balance scale to be equal? 8, right? Because 8 plus 4 is going to give me 12. So X is going to be 8. But here's the thing you need to know when you're solving equations. You're right. I could look at this and say 8. However, they get more complicated. Okay? So in order to solve the equation and figure out how do you get 8 without just looking at it, is what's the opposite? I'm going to look at this subtraction symbol, or I'm sorry, the addition symbol, and think, okay, what is the opposite of addition?
Subtraction.
Subtraction. So to get rid of that 4, to isolate X, or to get X by itself, how do I get rid of adding 4?
4 minus 12.
What?
4 minus 12.
Yeah, I'm going to subtract 4, or 12 minus 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides of my equation. Whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other to keep things balanced. What's positive 4 minus 4? 0. So what I have is I still have x, but I'm adding 0. And then what's 12 minus 4? 8. Some people, in order to keep what you do to one side, you must do to the other, they put a line, dotted line down the middle. I recommend that if you, especially once we do more complicated equations. Yeah. How do you do yours? Okay. I mean, you can do that. However, I need you to do it this way because they're going to get harder. Yeah, I don't care. I mean, as long as you can show what you're doing. Okay. Basically, what you're doing is you're just finding the difference, the difference between the two. Okay, but you're going to subtract 4 in order to get 8. Now, x plus 0 is just x, right? Because anything plus 0, that's the identity property. So I'm left with x equals 8. Is x by itself?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know what x equals, and if I would take that 8, plug it back into this x, I'd have 8 plus 4, which equals 12, so I'm good. X equals 8. I solved my one-step equation. All right, any questions? Now suppose I have a subtraction problem. Let's do a subtraction. Suppose I have r minus 2 equals negative 6. I want to get r by itself, but I have that minus 2 that I have to get rid of. Well, what's the opposite of subtraction? Addition. So I have to think, okay, opposite of subtraction is addition. So how do I get minus 2? Add 2. Whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. Think of that like a scale. If you have plus a negative 2, negative 2 plus 2 gives me 0. Negative 6 plus 2. Think of your chips. You have 6 red chips, 2 black chips. How many red chips do you have left? 4 red chips, so negative 4. R plus 0 is R equals negative 4. Now, we take that negative 4, and we're going to plug it back in for R. We get negative 4 plus or minus 2. Does that equal negative 6? Well, if I have 4 red chips and I add 2 more red chips, how many red chips do I have? Negative 6. So that checks out. So we did an addition, we did a subtraction. Now let's try another one. Negative 3 times p equals negative 48. Now, what kind of problem is that if there's no sign in there? Multiplication. Yeah. What's the opposite of multiplication? Division. So what do I have to do to both sides? Divide by negative 3. And this is how I show division. A line. Divide by negative 3. What's negative 3 divided by negative 3?
0.
Not 0. 1. So I'm left with 1 times p. Okay. Equals, well, what's negative 48 divided by negative 3? Well, if you're not sure, think of this. Negative divided by negative is a positive. Remember how we do those?
Yeah.
We did that at the beginning of the year, before you guys were here.
I haven't done that.
Long division.
Use my calculator before we got here.
Understood. Okay. So 48 divided by 3 is 16. And a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So I have 1 times P, which is the identity property, P equals positive 16. Does that work? If I take 16, negative 3 times positive 16, 16 times 3, 6 times 3 is 18, 48. Negative times a positive is a negative. Yes, it works. All right, division. If I have, let's say, negative 9 equals y divided by negative 3. That line stands for division. What is the opposite of division? Multiplication. So I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 3. Why did I put negative 3 over 1?
It's the whole number.
Right. Is this one actually, is the first one a fraction?
Yeah.
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 So when you multiply fractions, what do you do first? Cross reduce, right. Well, what's negative 3 and negative 3 cross reduce to?
0.
Not 0.
9.
1.
No.
Divided by negative 3, divided by negative 3, and what am I left with? Y times 1 gives me y, and 1 times 1 gives me 1. Still here in the middle. Negative 3 times negative 9, and negative times a negative gives me what? Positive, and what's 3 times 9? 27. So I have positive 27. Y divided by 1 is just y.
So y equals 27.
Y equals 27. Well, does that work? Let's go plug it in. 27 divided by negative 3. 27 divided by 3? 9. Positive divided by negative? Yes, it checks out.
Did we have to show that on our homework to check?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Yes, I want you to check it. All right, let's do a couple of different ones. About 3 more examples.
Then we have time.
Then you'll have time to do your homework and I'll grade some. H over 10 equals negative 22 over 5. Oops. Well, this is division. I want to get h by itself, so how do I get rid of division? Multiply both sides by 10, right? Well, I want to multiply by 10 over 1 so that I can cross-reduce those 10s. Do I have a fraction on this side? So I want to multiply by what? Yes, so that I can cross-reduce first. Cross-reduce these to 1, and I'm left with 1h over 1. Okay, here's my line. Equals. Now, what do I do to cross-reduce? Do 5 and 10 cross-reduce?
Yeah.
What are they both divisible by?
2.
5.
5. 5 divided by 5 is what? 10 divided by 5? Now I'm going to marry my tops and marry my bottoms. Negative 22 times 2. Well, what's 22 times 2? 44. Okay. Negative times a positive.
Negative times positive.
Negative. So negative 44. And then I have 1 times 1. H divided by 1 is just h. Negative 44 divided by 1 is negative 44. So there's my answer. Now we're going to plug it back in. So I have negative 44 divided by 10. What does that equal? I'm just going to reduce it to get what it equals. Divide both by 2. 10 divided by 2? 44 divided by 2? 0.2, and then it's a negative because negative divided by positive is negative. So So I have negative 22 over 5. Is that what I started with? Negative 22 over 5?
Yep.
So I'm good. What's that?
Then blue.
I plugged it in.
I plugged it in there.
Correct.
And I checked it.
Hey, can you be
If you have a fraction multiplied by a variable, okay, automatically your first instinct is to divide by 1/4, right? Well, when you divide a fraction, what are you doing? Multiplying by the reciprocal. So instead of dividing by 1/4, which I don't want you to do, I want you to multiply both sides by 4 over 1. Okay? So you're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal if you see a fraction. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So I'm just left with 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, which just gives me 1z. Okay? 1 times 1 gives me 1. 1 times 1 gives me 1. 1 over 1 is 1. Lots of 1. Equals, well, now this one, can I cross reduce? Can I cross reduce 5 and 4 or 2 and 1? So how do I multiply fractions? Not cross. Yeah, across the top, across the bottom. Mary's top, Mary's bottom. 2 times 4, 5 times 1. Okay, this is just 2 times 4. If you don't know this yet, we've been talking about since the beginning of the year. You need to start getting with it. You need to find a way to remember that. You don't cross multiply, okay? You don't find a common denominator. When you multiply fractions, you marry the tops, you marry the bottoms. Okay, you need to find a way to remember that. So now I have z equals 8/5. So now we check it. Let's go back. Let's plug it in. 1/4 times 8/5. Well, when you multiply fractions, what do you do? Yes!
Yeah, marry the top.
Marry the tops, marry the bottoms. So it's 8 times 1. Okay, and 4 times 5. I could have cross reduced first, but I didn't. So I have 8 over 20. Can I reduce that fraction?
Yes.
Divide both by what?
2.
You can 2. Is there anything higher? 4. So divide both by 4, and I get 2/5. Is that what I got in the beginning? 2/5? Yes, it checks out. I'm good.
What was that?
Almost. There's one pretty ugly problem on here that I want to do for you. There's a really ugly one. Here's what it looks like. Ugly, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. How do I get a by itself?
You subtract on both sides.
Subtract what?
4.
Subtract 1 and 1/4 on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to subtract. Here's my middle. 1 and 1/4. Because subtraction is the opposite of addition. Subtract 1 and 1/4. 1 and 1/4 minus 2 and 1/4 is just 0. So I have 8 plus 0. Now, here is one we haven't talked about in a while. When you subtract fractions, what do you have to do? Common denominator. Okay, now you find a common denominator. This one's tough. That's why I'm doing this one for you. So write this one down for sure, because this one's on your homework. It's tough. So I have 10 and 4. How do I find a common denominator of 10 and 4? What's that? Take the higher one and write all our multiples. 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay, does 4 go into 10? No. Does 4 go into 20?
Yes.
Yes, there it is.
5 times.
Yep, so I have 20 as my common denominator. How do I get from 10 to 20?
Times by 5.
Times by, from 10 to 20. Multiply by 2. So 10 times 2 is 20. 7 times 2?
14.
14. How do I get from 4 to 20? Times 5. 4 times 5 is 20. 1 times 5 is? Now you subtract.
Now, what about your
Whole numbers, they stay. Basically, this is what I used to do. I used to cross that out and say, okay, now I have 2 and 14 20ths minus 1 and 5 20ths. 14 minus 5? So I have 9 20ths. 2 minus 1? Can I reduce that at all?
no?
Nope. Your answer. Now to check it, so I have 1 and 9 20ths plus 1 and a 4. In order to do that, I have to find a common denominator. I'm going to write them upside down, or side by, on top of each other so you can see. Okay, common denominator, what did we determine between 20 and 4?
Yeah, what?
20 and 4, common denominator?
5.
20, so yeah. This one's staying the same because it's already multiplied, it's already 20. How do I get from 4 to 20? Times 5. 1 times 5 is 5. 9 plus 5?
14.
1 plus 1. Yep, so I have 2. These are going to cancel, and 14 over 20. Is that what I have in the beginning? 2 and 7 tenths? Oh, I can reduce. What is 2 and 14 20ths? Can I divide both of those by? Divide by 2. 7 and 10. So I have 2 and 7 tenths. Is that what I started with?
No. Yeah.
2 and 7 tenths? So does it check out?
Yep.
So A equals 1 and 9 20ths. That's probably the toughest one on the worksheet.